Today, I am sharing my interview with the amazing OT Ashley Hobson. We cover how to make more money as a contract therapist, how to get started as a contract therapist, and why entrepreneurship is so important for OTs, and why she has a personal passion for it as an OTD Capstone Coordinator. So Ashley is an assistant professor, OTD Capstone Coordinator, Lind Fellow in Core Faculty, and Certified Interprofessional Educator at the University of Oklahoma Health Services Center. Ashley teaches the entry-level and post-professional programs in the Department of Rehabilitation Services and is very intentional about embedding professionalism and leadership development into the student experience. Ashley lives by what she teaches and is a big leader herself in her own community. She serves on several community organization executive boards. She serves on several department and college committees and is a core speaker for Wellspring, which is a community-based conference focused on family health and wellness. And Ashley teaches the leadership and management course for the OTD program, which is a topic that she is particularly passionate about. And it is her hope that all students complete the OT program equipped to be leaders in practice, as well as have the skills to pursue entrepreneurship and develop innovative practices if they have an interest in doing so. Enjoy this interview. So today I am joined by the incredible Ashley, and I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So I want to kick off because you were raised in an entrepreneurial family. So could you tell us a little bit about that upbringing and what were some of the lessons that you find yourself thinking about today?
Sure. Yeah. So my dad was actually born in Luxembourg and he moved over. They came to America when he was a baby and he grew up with very little. So he grew up watching construction and playing on construction sites for fun and developed this passion for construction. So fast forward to college, he and my mom meet. My mom was in OT school at the time. So he developed this passion for construction and with the goal of creating a construction company one day. She was an OT. And so I got to grow up with the best of both worlds with a dad who worked his way up through the construction industry, earned 4 degrees, and now has a construction company that he helped build from the ground up. And then I have a mom who has practiced, as she's no longer practicing, but she practiced my entire childhood as an occupational therapist. So I got to really learn that compassion, the passion she has for serving others, kindness, integrity.
That's incredible. And what were some of the, I think, struggles that maybe you saw your father go through with building the construction company that he had that you think have influenced the way you approach your career?
It's a great question. So one thing when they had us, they were both starting their careers. I say us, I have one older brother. It's the two of us. So we're a close-knit family. We don't have any cousins or anything, but they had us. And then he continued on with school. So as he was learning the construction industry and working his way up on the business side, he was also juggling having 2 young children and going to school. And so one thing that he really emphasized to us was not to see obstacles as absolutes. So, and they're not no's, they're just have to figure out a way to navigate them. So that, and then he also emphasized that failure was part of the process of getting to your goals. So that is one thing that's always resonated with me, that failure is an inevitable experience if you are going to set big goals for yourself and not to attempt to avoid them. They're going to happen, and usually they're helpful in the long run.
Yeah. I love that. And that's something that my wife and I see a lot with the way that we're raising our kids, since we're both entrepreneurs and we're constantly talking to them about. There's a book by the title of The Gift of Failure about raising children with a growth mindset, and how
Mhm.
you can't do every single thing for them, and you want to raise them to have the embrace of uncertainty, the embrace of challenge, and to realize that a lot of times the setbacks are just really temporary. And I think it's a
Absolutely.
real growth mindset, but also like a real entrepreneurial mindset. Because if you've been in it for any amount of time, you absolutely know things don't go according to plan right
And if
away.
you grow up in it, it's not uncomfortable to you, right?
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
don't see failure as a bad thing. You see it as a learning process.
Yes.
And so you guys probably do this as well. What my parents did with this, they would always emphasize the process, not the product,
Yeah.
for us
Right.
especially. So even though I'm sure they had products, like end goals in mind that they knew they had to meet in some capacity, for us, whenever we would try something new, it was always emphasis on what were we learning? What were we taking from that?
Yeah.
If we failed, no big deal. We tried something new. We had, we would dare to try. We would have the confidence to try something new.
Yeah. And that reminds me, it's one of the things that I talk about with some of the OTs that I coach, which is you mentioned focused on the process rather than the end product. And that's the way I kind of talk to them about setting goals is don't have your goals be a fixed number, right? Say that you want to see like a certain number of clients or that you want a certain end result. Set your goals based on like, what is the process you're going to follow? What are the tasks that you're actually going to do? Because the only thing you can
Mhm.
control is your effort. You can't control the outcome. So if you
Right.
set up the effort around the activities that you think is going to really lead to the outcome, then you're going to become much less disappointed because you're controlling the one thing that you can control, which is what you're working on versus what the outcome is.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're emphasizing the importance of pre-planning and being intentional
Yes.
with what you're doing. And I feel like with that really reiterates the whole being focused on the mission, like your why you're doing what you're doing, not necessarily how you're doing it. You can pivot if you are focused on the purpose, right? And if you're learning through the process and you're not afraid to navigate the different changes based on, whatever challenges they are, have to recalculate. I'm sure you've done it a lot in business with having to, based on the current status of like even just our society and the needs and technology, really navigating all of those changes and what do they mean.
Yes. Yeah. I think being flexible is absolutely key. And one of the things that you are quite an expert at is contract therapy. So becoming
Yeah.
a contractor. And I'm excited to explore this topic with you because, we've talked about it before. Becoming a contract therapist is a great way to dip your toes into working for yourself. And so what do you find are some of the benefits to becoming a contract therapist for OTs?
Yes. So I really do feel like this is the perfect way to get into having a business with a little added security of more support than you might feel like if you just completely started from scratch. I feel like for me, there's like personal benefits and also professional benefits. So personally, contract therapy allowed me to have time and flexibility. So I have two boys and I was able to build my schedule around being with them more, especially before they were both school aged, which was huge to me. It provided me the time in my schedule to pursue my goal of going back for my post professional degree because I was able to build my schedule around when my classes would be and what my kids were needing. Professionally, oh gosh, I have a whole list. I feel like autonomy and leadership experience were huge. So having that say in how I was going to practice, the settings I was going to practice in, the populations I would be able to serve with my skills and expertise developing my leadership skills for myself, and then also having a small team, because I was still able to have OTAs that I would work with on my team and build the small team without necessarily feeling like I was in charge of an entire organization. Networking opportunities is another big one. So learning how to make valuable connections and talk about what I was able to do, like what services I could provide, what skill set I had, making professional relationships, and then also turning those and using those to find my community relationships. So I have patients that I saw who became dear friends because I had time. Being a contract therapist, I had time to connect and really develop a strong relationship with them. And down the road, those are people who connected me with community organizations that I still serve and work with today. So I feel like a lot of opportunities opened up. I developed management skills because in contract, you have to be able to manage your own time. You have to be able to take into consideration the costs. You're in charge of more of your expenses and taxes and some of the more logistics of business, but not necessarily full business yet. And then opportunities to be innovative. So when I was a contract therapist, I was able to identify different organizations and populations that I wanted to serve, and I could create contracts with them. So I didn't have to fall under this preset umbrella of where I could and couldn't practice based on my setting.
That's wonderful. I think it's a great way to dip your toes into that entrepreneurial field. And probably some OTs will start doing it and they find out they love it and they want to go even further and go, okay, I want to do this full time. I want to have my own business. And I'm comfortable not really having that safety net of the,
Absolutely.
W-2 position. But then probably other OTs are like, you know what? It's a little bit too uncertain. It's a little bit too risky. And actually, I would prefer to go back to a W-2. And I think it's a great intermediate step to really sit and to see how it feels in your body and how it feels in your life and before you take a really big plunge, right?
Yes. And I feel like it's also something that you don't have to not do because you also need some stability. So a lot of people will have a job that's their full-time job where they're, 36 hours a week, and then they contract on the side for supplemental, and then they grow their contract work because they love it so much, and they're able to kind of fade out of whichever setting they might not feel is the best fit for them. And I think that's wonderful about it too. But
Yeah.
I do see a lot of people really realizing how much they love it, and how having the ability to have more say in how you spend your day and how you spend your time, it's not as hard as they thought it would be,
Yeah.
and they end up loving it. It's just getting the right resources and supports along the way.
Yeah, I think, and I hear this a lot from a lot of OTs who get maybe a little bit frustrated that they don't have that autonomy. They don't have the control. They don't have the flexibility. They feel really, really tied down. And when I'm talking with them, I always tell them like, that's most likely the location or the specific environment you're working in. It's not the entire field
Absolutely.
because there's so many different ways that you can practice. And you have these really valuable skill sets that actually there's a lot of abundance and flexible work
Absolutely.
positions out there that will allow you to show up in the way that you want to show up and that also fits your life, which I think is really empowering. So
I love that because I think the exact same thing. I think if you're feeling burnt out in OT, you're in the wrong setting,
yeah,
because you can be virtually anywhere, right?
right.
We have so many settings that we can practice in. And whenever if you feel undervalued, that's also a setting problem. So if you're, I feel like there's almost always a solution. That to me is an obstacle that you can navigate. It doesn't
Right.
mean abandon your profession. It doesn't mean that this isn't the right fit and what you love doing somehow is not really what you're meant to do.
And I think that that comes from your upbringing. So because you started off with like, okay, my parents taught me that if there is a problem, there has to be a solution. If there's a challenge, we're just going to be able to find a way to fix that challenge in a way that works for you.
Yes,
Could you
there's
give
very few problems that don't have
a
some
solution?
solution.
Yes, yes. It may not be totally obvious, but it is definitely there. And I always one thing that I always think about is you're not the only person in the entire world who's ever faced this. And so a lot of times it's just getting out there and talking with people and seeing other ways you can practice, what have other OTs done, because the more you shrink your world and you focus on it just being your individual problem without a solution, it's going to be very hard to always come up with the options. But once you get out and you start networking, you start talking to your colleagues, you start talking to people in different settings, your kind of whole world and perspective opens up and you can start to imagine the different possibilities and not feel, I think, so stuck, you know?
And hearing people's stories about how they learned and worked through the process instead of assuming that everyone who's doing it somehow has this expansive expertise that you don't, right?
Right.
Like and now there are so many resources available for what you don't know that there's really not a reason to try.
Yes, absolutely. So could you give all of the OTs kind of an overview of the different ways that you could contract and perhaps some tips if they want to get started with this?
Sure. Yeah. So with contract, you can either contract through yourself, you create an LLC. I would recommend creating an LLC either way and having a business account. And then you can either seek out your own contracts or you can contract with an agency that's going to negotiate contracts for you and then reimburse you for those. So when I started contracting, I worked for an organization, an entity, and I, whenever I was paid, I would keep 80% of everything I billed, which I felt was pretty fair because of when you think about all of the logistics of the documentation system and things like that. But you can also do it without having any type of agency helping you, and you can seek out your own contracts and negotiate directly with organizations and insurance companies or out of pocket private pay. And you can either be reimbursed a percentage of what you bill, or you can be reimbursed a flat rate based on the service provided. So I don't see a reason to ever not offer an out of pocket or private pay option because that opens up your opportunities to the services you're able to provide. But you can do like school contracts, you can do insurance contracts, you can do private pay, you can contract with hospitals, virtually any setting we have OT, you can contract, and you can also create opportunities where they don't exist. So one thing I think I typically used to think of as being academia only was grant opportunities, but there are a lot of community-based grants that exist that organizations have, and you can go to nonprofits and contract with them if you are able to explain your expertise, your role, and what you can provide them. You can also contract directly with nonprofit organizations. So it depends on, again, whether you're contracting directly with places through an LLC or if you're a contractor with an agency. Some agencies will reimburse for mileage. You can negotiate that into contracts. When I was in a public school setting, I would get reimbursed for my drive time, my documentation time. Anytime I was on the clock for them, it was the same rate. So you can negotiate all of those things as you establish contracts with different organizations. And then you can ask if they reimburse for CEUs, or do they cover a percentage of insurance, or some will cover the cost of your licensure and your renewal fees. And they will also cover just like a flat rate for mileage. So those are all things you want to consider, because depending on your financial situation, if you have the option to be on a significant other's insurance, or do you need your own insurance? Do you need your paycheck to be consistent, or is it okay if it fluctuates a little bit? So those are things that I would consider when you're looking at how you want to contract, but there's an option that works for either.
And would you say, in terms of compensation, the level of compensation for per client visit or per hour, whatever unit of measurement you want to define, is higher in the contracting space versus if you were a full-time W-2 employee at a clinic?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was able to make the same or more contracting than 3 to 3.5 days a week that I was able to make 5 days a week as a full-time employee.
I mean, that's significant right there, I think, because, I think it's really empowering to know that you can be doing the same type of work, but you can have more flexibility in your schedule.
Yes.
You can have more control over the settings that you're working in, and you can potentially work less, but either make the same amount or actually make more. That it's not I talk to a lot of OTs and they feel very stuck from a money perspective,
Yes.
because they're making $37 to $42 an hour net when it's all said and done for the 40 hours or 36 hours they're working that week. And they have a massive amount of student loans and they feel very, very squeezed in the middle. And I think it's a great option for OTs like that to explore either keeping your full-time job and adding this as an add-on to start paying down your student loans, or just depending on your life situation, going into just being a full-time or part-time contracting therapist and having a little bit more flexibility in your schedule and keeping your income at the same or a higher level.
I completely agree. I think that there is no reason people should believe that OTs cannot make 6 figures and live comfortably and have balance and do well. Some of that I feel like comes from, not being comfortable discussing how to change that, or how we used to not really talk about hourly rates or income in general. It was kind of taboo. And now we have this understanding that that's why a lot of people were stuck where they were, because they were believing this, and that really benefits a few larger organizations that like to keep everything at the top. But we are a very valuable service. We're a very needed service, and we have a lot of expertise to bring to the table that really makes a difference in people's lives. So there is no reason not to be compensated fairly for that. And I
That is like
completely
a
agree.
truth bomb right there. Like we could end the whole interview just on that, because I think all OTs need to hear that more and more, and like again and again to feel comfortable stepping into that, because you're right. I mean, it's a really taboo topic, and especially in healthcare in general. Money in society in general is very taboo, but especially within healthcare. And I just think it's really refreshing to hear other OTs kind of empower each other and go like, look, you're really valuable. You've spent a long time at school. You
Yeah.
are fundamentally changing people's lives. Like, if you look at your compensation versus a mechanic is probably making more. Like, why is that? And you are providing something way more valuable than that. And it's just a matter of getting out of the status quo about how OT's been practiced for a long time and finding creative solutions to boost your income along the way. There's nothing the matter with that.
There's nothing. Yeah, exactly. And I wonder, some of that, I feel like you're an entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I feel like you like talking about money is not wrong. It's transparency. It's just kind of part of what you do. I think that financial literacy is very helpful. We don't get that in traditional education, in our programs. A lot of the time it's excluded. So we say advocate for yourself, talk about, make sure that no one's taking advantage of you, that you're not being underpaid, but we don't say what that is.
Right.
And so I
It's
like to
left
give
vague.
numbers.
Yes. Yeah. I would say that ask yourself this one question, which is, do you maybe have too high of a tolerance for being underpaid? Right.
Mhm.
And
That's a
I
good,
think,
yeah.
I think that ends up happening a lot, and we don't really question it. But I talk a lot about like money mindset and limiting beliefs behind money. And I think that's really, really prevalent within the healthcare field, and starting to reconcile your own money stories and the invisible scripts you have about money, and asking yourself like internally, like, why do I have this ability to put up with being under-earned? It's the same side of the equation, or the same side of the coin, I think, for people who overspend and are maybe too ambitious. I think both reflect kind of a unhealthy balance towards
Relationship with, yeah.
money. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's you don't have to go the other extreme. It's kind of more just looking at it as a neutral thing and going, it's just fair compensation for what I'm providing someone. So
And it allows me to provide the quality of life I want to be able to provide for myself, for my
yes,
kids. It's not selfish to want to be able to take care of your own health and well-being and the health and well-being of your family.
that's totally right. That's totally right. I think one of the most important aspects of stepping up as an entrepreneur, talking about entrepreneurship, is embracing your inner leader. And I think we all have this capacity to be a leader, like whether or not it's just us in our own lives or influencing others. And I think you teach a course called Leadership and Management at university. So what do you find is the difference between a leader versus a manager, and how could OTs apply this principle in their life?
So for me, the most basic way to break it down is that we lead people, we manage things.
Mm,
Right?
love
So
that.
we manage tasks, we manage obligations, but people don't want to be managed. They want to have leadership. They want to be able to grow. They want someone who is passionate and shares the same vision that they do. So, whenever we approach leadership versus management, yes, a lot of leadership requires management skills. You have to be able to manage your time, your resources. It's hard to be successful in larger leadership roles without having management skills, but we cannot use them interchangeably because leadership is really about the relationship we have with people, the difference we're making in the lives of others. And it's really, when I think of the foundation of leadership, it is kindness, respect for others, and wanting to serve others and see others succeed.
Yeah. And I think there's a powerful corollary to that in wanting to see others succeed, which is influence, and the more you want, I find the more you want other people to succeed and the more you set them up for success, the more influential you become, because
Mhm.
people want to surround themselves with people who lift them up, not are just assigning task to them at the end of the day.
Assigning tasks and taking credit, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So we also go into the difference between a leader and a boss, because you can be assigned a position of authority or power and not be a leader, and your team will not thrive, right?
Yeah.
But if you are leading people and you are passionate about what you're doing and you're helping others become passionate about what they're doing, the whole group moves forward. And that's a much greater impact than what we can have ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a misnomer that you need a title to be a leader. Like
Exactly.
you don't need a title to be a leader. So what's like one thing, maybe someone's branching out on their own, they just have themselves, they don't have a team. Is there like one leadership principle they could apply in their life that would be most valuable?
Yes. So growth mindset, I think, is the one of the core principles of leadership. So that because it encompasses all other areas of leadership. As society changes, as our cultures change and we evolve, we have different perspectives and interactions that are going to change different leadership skills we have, but a commitment to that growth mindset, and whether it's formal or informal learning that we're committed to doing, that continuous growth is going to be what always helps us move forward and have impact. I My dad, one thing he always does is he started this when we were in high school. We get a book every holiday. So a lot of them are either personal development or professional development. And The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson talks about how you're never stagnant. So you're always moving forward or you're moving back because everything else is moving forward without you.
Hmm, I love that.
So having that commitment to lifelong learning and continuous growth is crucial. And also just knowing that personal development is leadership development.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Because, yeah,
100% agree with that. Yeah, I think especially when it comes to, I mean, definitely that's true in all areas of life. And I think because I coach a lot of OTs wanting to start their own private pay practice. And one of the things we talk about a lot in the program is mindset and about the personal development. And I say to them at the very beginning when they enroll, like the hardest thing that you're going to manage throughout this entire process is yourself.
yes.
That's who you're, guess you're going to be impacting clients. That's going to go without saying, let's almost just because you're an OT, you have great skills, like you're going to be changing their lives. But then a lot of the OTs are just so surprised by how much they change through the process, like how much inner resilience it requires, how much it requires to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And they start to find like this inner strength to be confident to have difficult phone conversations or to talk about money with their clients. And all of this stuff requires you to get out of your comfort zone and
Mhm.
grow. And the most successful ones are the ones who just go, okay, well, that's a challenge. That's the next skill that I need to develop. It's a skill I can develop. Let's find out how to develop that in the best way possible, right?
And it's not something that makes or breaks whether I can be successful in my goals, right?
Right.
It's just something I need to grow and learn in. And I love that.
Yes. So you are doing great work with OT students and kind of showing them, what's possible from an entrepreneurship perspective. And what is some of your advice to OTs who want to start down this path, but are nervous if they could really do it?
Okay. So, very first piece of advice is not to place limitations on yourself, because the first thing that's going to be the reason you're not successful is never trying. Right. So that would be the first, is that do not assume you are not capable, because we can break things down into small steps, as small as we need
Yeah.
to be successful and to learn how to navigate. So don't let fear or getting out of your comfort zone be a limiting factor.
Yeah.
I tell my students that I believe in being an entrepreneur so much. Like, if it was ethical, I would buy them all an LLC as their graduation gift, because there's no reason not to, right? There's no reason not to have the option that if you wanted to start providing a service outside of your current setting, that
Yeah.
you'd be able to do so.
Yep.
And I know you talk a lot about, the doors that open whenever you step outside of the insurance box.
Yes. Yes.
And that's so true. So why not go ahead and, anybody could could seek you out for the
Exactly.
opportunity for private pay services. So having that, another thing to remember is that there's almost always a solution or a way around every barrier.
Yep.
So when you hit roadblocks, when you hit challenges, like you're saying, like that's just a skill to learn. That's not a no, or you're not capable. It's just you don't know it yet.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
That's the power of the word yet. If you just
Yeah.
add the word yet to anything of like, oh, I don't know how to market yet, or I don't know how to bill yet. I don't know, it kind of reframes your mind to go, all right, well, this is just something I can learn. And thousands of other people have learned this, and I'm just as smart and capable as they are,
Yes,
and
I love that so much.
yeah,
Yes, just adding yet, or I can't do it yet, right?
yes.
Like
Yep.
that anything is possible. You just have to be willing to learn and grow.
Yep.
Another thing though, this is like a little bit more like practical, is not to spend time reinventing the wheel when great resources exist, like your entire program. Like why would someone spend time going and trying to find a ton of different resources from different places whenever it's already available to them, like packaged? You've done the work, you have the expertise. So don't spend all of your energy on your weaknesses whenever there's someone else's strengths, right?
Yeah.
You rely on your strengths and then find the resources and supports that already exist from people who have the strengths that you don't.
Yeah. I think that that's great advice, because exactly as you said, why would you reinvent the wheel? Like, coaching and programs, they're not going to do everything for you, but they're going to help you. There's always a blind spot in that we don't know what we don't know, and that is there's a really high cost to crossing that barrier. And if you try to do it on your own, which my wife and I, we tried to do it on our own, and we did do it on our own, but it took us many years to figure it out. And we made a ton of mistakes along the way. And then just being able to go, okay, look, we tried these 100 things, 10 of them worked. Just go do the 10. Don't waste your
Yes,
time on the 90. Just go do the 10, because you're going to try lots of stuff, and most of it's not going to move the needle. It's the 80-20 principle. And so finding that, 80% to really, or the 20% to really focus on. And that's what I think really curated content can do, custom programs and everything. And it just gets you towards your goal faster.
absolutely. Especially when you're like, okay, I want to do this, but I don't have 100 mistakes
Yeah.
in me. Like I don't have that kind of time or those resources to navigate through all of those. Well, you don't have to, because someone else already has.
Yeah.
So use what's available.
You said something in the very beginning that I wanted to circle back to, which was just there's no reason not to do it. And, just go ahead and give yourself the option. And I love that, because I think a lot of times people overestimate how hard it is, and also how costly it is. And I always like to compare it to like setting up a dental practice, or setting up a coffee shop. Like,
Not even close.
it's not even exactly like before, like think about a dentist, like before they open their doors, they have to sign a big lease. They have to buy all this really expensive equipment. They have to hire dental hygienists. They have to hire front office staff. Like their bill is so expensive before they ever even get one patient into the door. But as an OT, you can start mobile, you can start as a contract. You just need the LLC and some liability
Mhm.
insurance. And you don't have to have a physical location. You probably have most of the props and equipment you need to see your first client. And then you can
Mhm.
grow over time. So always look at it like what's the worst that can happen is you've
Right.
just spent some time. You haven't spent a ton of money. You've just spent your time. And
And you will learn regardless,
exactly.
right? You
Yes.
will learn through that.
Yes. 100%.
We are very unique in that in most settings, we carry everything we need in ourselves,
Right.
right? So when I was I did bagless therapy. I would walk into homes and work with children and families, and I would have nothing with me. I needed nothing other than myself. And we have that expertise. Like we are all our resources and
Right.
our skills and our expertise, right?
Yes.
So less than $1,000 to have the ability to, I'd say that speak where I am,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
sure, less. And I feel like that in most areas, like for the basics of what you need, less than $1,000 to start. So why not?
Exactly. Why not? And I think, what do you have to lose? So I think
Mhm.
that's a perfect thing to end it on, which is, what do you
Yes,
have to lose? You don't really have anything to lose, and you have a ton of stuff to gain.
to
So
gain.
Ashley, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. This has been incredible talking with you today, and I can't wait
Thank you
to
so
share
much.
it with everyone. Thank you.
I'm so excited too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.